What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today I wanted to go over all of my thoughts and opinions regarding hardcore mode in Diablo 4 Season 4. Now, if you haven't already heard, there was a massive campfire chat yesterday that was pretty well received, and there are a ton of changes coming to the base game, and a lot of those changes are actually going to affect how you play hardcore mode going forward in Diablo 4. Now, I know there are not a lot of hardcore players out there currently for Diablo 4, but I am one of those few players, and I am really looking forward to testing out the hardcore mode in Season 4. However, some of the changes announced during the campfire chat are pretty massive in terms of how hardcore mode will feel, and honestly, it may in fact make the game mode almost unplayable if things are not adjusted correctly. So let's go ahead and talk about one of the changes they made to hardcore mode, and honestly, this one is probably the biggest one considering the current state of the game, and that is the removal of the death evasion elixir. So if you didn't know, the death evasion elixir is an elixir the player can craft in Diablo 4 that will pretty much allow the player to have a 2-second immunity if they take fatal damage during their gameplay, and have the opportunity to use the scroll of escape to teleport their character out of danger, basically avoiding certain death. Now, due to the potency of this elixir, a lot of players were asking for this thing to be removed from the game to actually make the hardcore mode, well, actually hardcore. Now, personally, in my opinion, I do find that the removal of the death evasion elixir was necessary, especially as the game has gotten far too easy after the Season 2 rebalancing of the game, which they're actually doing again for Season 4. And I'm definitely glad they're making the game a little bit more difficult. However, I do foresee a lot of issues arising in hardcore mode, especially if they do not balance the difficulty of the game properly. In my opinion, there are far too many one-shots that still exist in the game that you can't necessarily outplay. A great example of that this season would be the guardsman constructs that can literally one-shot your character off screen without you ever actually seeing them using their charging attack. And there are still quite a few issues with the amount of crowd control effects the enemies have, as well as explosive pools of damage and, well, everybody's favorite damage over time, poison. Now, it's not that I'm actually against those mechanics existing in a game. However, it's more or less that I think the opportunity to outplay those mechanics currently does not exist in Diablo 4. And due to those issues, and several things also mentioned in the campfire chat that we'll be getting into, I do feel like there is a potential for hardcore mode to be incredibly difficult, almost unplayable, if a lot of these issues are not taken into consideration and balanced appropriately going into Season 4. Now, my second concern regarding hardcore going into Season 4 was something they briefly touched base on when they were going over the brand new unique coming to the game called Tyrael's Might. Now, if you didn't watch the campfire chat, this was something they touched on briefly, and it was basically the fact that it is now going to be far more rare to get damage reduction stats on your gear pieces. Now, if you didn't know, in the game currently, it's not actually that uncommon to find a gear piece with 3 or 4 decently rolled damage reduction affixes on it that pretty much make your character exceptionally tanky, and when combined with the elixir of death evasion, almost impossible to kill. Now, again, in my opinion, this is a good change coming to the game. I do think it was far too easy to create a character who could do a ton of damage while also being able to tank through every single thing that exists in the game, except for maybe an Uber Lilith one-shot mechanic. However, my concern here is, again, with the rebalancing of the game and the fact that there are still issues in terms of one-shots and different damage over time effects, as well as different crowd control effects, that the added difficulty to the game, combined with the fact that they're removing the death evasion elixir, as well as making damage reduction stat rolls far harder to obtain on your gear pieces, is really going to create an environment where it's not a matter of if, but when your hardcore character actually dies. Now, with the addition of greater affixes and masterworking added to the game, there is the potential to have a massive damage reduction roll on your gear piece that will kind of alleviate some of that burden added to the game by making damage reduction affixes more rare. Also, it does seem like when observing the Tyrael's Might unique item that they are adding more ways to break resistance caps into the game to further reduce the damage you take from elemental damage types. And with that, I am also hoping that they increase the amount of damage reduction you can obtain when acquiring higher amounts of armor. I think these things will be incredibly important when building a character out in order to tackle those higher tiers of the brand new in-game content coming to the game called the Pit. And not just the Pit, but also when we're going to be going up against level 200 Uber bosses. Something I think they could possibly add to the game in the future, if in fact hardcore mode does become almost unplayable due to a lot of the concerns I've previously stated, would be a system similar to the one in Last Epoch regarding endurance. So if you haven't played Last Epoch, in that game there is a stat called endurance as well as endurance threshold. And what it's comparable to in Diablo 4 would be the affix called damage reduction while injured. And if you've played either of those games, you would know that what it does is once your character reaches a certain health threshold, you then get a massive amount of damage reduction, which then gives the player the opportunity to outplay whatever mechanic is currently putting them in danger of losing their character. Now, with that being said, I'm sure you're probably saying that, well, why not just get damage reduction while injured affixes on your gear pieces? Well, where that is a possibility, it does seem like your gear affixes are going to be far more valuable going into Season 4 than they really are in Season 3 and previously. And something that Last Epoch actually does quite well with Endurance and Endurance Threshold is that they actually give the player many opportunities to acquire that stat outside of their actual gear pieces. And unfortunately, this is not the case currently in Diablo 4, which again can make it very difficult for the player to have the opportunity to outplay a certain game mechanic that might put the player in a compromising position and almost assuredly cost the player their hardcore character. Now again, I would like to restate that I do want this increased difficulty coming to the game because I do feel like the game is just far too easy in its current iteration. However, with regards to a game mode like Hardcore in Diablo 4, where the stakes are so incredibly high, where you actually lose your entire character if you do die, unlike in a game like Last Epoch, where your character just goes to the softcore realm, I would like each character death that a player has in Hardcore for Diablo 4 to be more of a learning experience instead of something that they basically couldn't avoid because of one of the many wonky mechanics that exist in Diablo 4 currently that might actually get passed into Season 4. Now, my third and final point I'll make for this video, and trust me, there are plenty more I could talk about, is that I hope they continue to fine-tune the mechanics involved with the Scroll of Escape. Now, if you don't play Hardcore, what the Scroll of Escape is basically a consumable that if you find yourself in a compromising position, you can utilize this item and it will teleport you to safety. Also, one of the better mechanics of the scroll is that if you do find yourself disconnecting from the game, this scroll will automatically be consumed and teleport your character to safety no matter where you're at. Now, obviously, this would not be Diablo 4 without a few bugs and glitches here and there, and it has been documented by plenty of hardcore players that these scrolls of escape do not always function as intended. There have been several instances where players have used their scroll of escape just to wind up teleporting into town and then instantly transported to the character select menu. And I know from my personal experience that this has happened to me, as well as I have also disconnected with an elixir of death evasion on my character and scrolls of escape in my inventory. And when I went to relog back into the game, I found that my character had died while I was disconnected. Now, it is my hope that they will do their due diligence and really tighten up the mechanics involved with the scroll of escape so that way it works as it's intended to function. Because again, just restating what I've said previously, with the removal of the elixir of death evasion, the increased difficulty coming to the game, as well as the objective of the end game being that we push higher and higher tiers of the pit, as well as fight uber bosses that are going to be level 200, if the scroll of escape does not work as it's intended to function, this could potentially lead to hardcore basically becoming unplayable and the overall game mode not really being a significant aspect for Diablo 4 going into Season 4. But anyways, guys, that's going to be it for the video. Like I said, I have plenty more issues I could discuss as I love playing hardcore. And I do look forward to all the changes coming to the game, and I think they are a much needed addition to Diablo 4, including the added difficulty, not just for softcore, but especially for hardcore players. However, as an avid hardcore player myself, I do hope that they do take into consideration some of the concerns I've listed in this video, so that way hardcore mode does become more difficult, but doesn't become impossible for the hardcore player base. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments section. Do you play hardcore mode? Do you plan on playing hardcore into Season 4? What are some of your concerns regarding survivability going into Season 4 now that we have some of the changes that are going to be coming to the game? And also, if you don't play hardcore, are these changes something that actually makes you more interested in playing hardcore for Season 4? But anyways, guys, as always, I hope you guys are having a great day or a great night, depending on wherever you're from, and peace out, guys. I will see you in the next one.